were supposed to miss the last tour of the day, which left at 3:30. Hey brewers and beer lovers, it's Jake with superbrewers.com. I know it's been a while since I posted a video, but life's been kind of crazy, but I really wanted to let you know about a trip we took a few weeks ago. And we were down in Kentucky, visited Mammoth Cave, which was really cool. And then we drove over to Cumberland Falls and we spent a couple days there hiking around and saw the falls and stuff. And then on the way back, we stopped at Buffalo Trace Distillery. We got there on a Friday afternoon about 4 o'clock, which, if you are familiar with the distillery, means we were supposed to miss the last tour of the day, which left at 3:30. We got there. I was really excited to go, so my wife told me to go ahead and head in and see if I could just see what was going on. And I got in there, and as I was walking in, somebody said, "Hey, they're getting one last tour together." So I ran to the back of the gift shop, and there was such a large group that they actually wound up splitting us into 2 groups to do the tour. And it was really awesome because it was after their last scheduled tour of the day, and 2 of their tour guides stayed late to take us around and stuff, and we didn't get to see the stills or anything, but they took us through one of the rick houses, which was really interesting. 24,000 barrels of bourbon aging in one building, which was really cool to see, learn about the history of the distillery and how they survived through Prohibition. The tour guide was definitely a bourbon fan, to put it lightly, but talked about the aging process, the blending process. We happened to be there on a day when they were using their small bottling line that they use for their small batches, which the Buffalo Trace Bourbon is a small batch, and then they have an Eagle Rare, and then any of their single barrel stuff gets bottled in the smaller bottling house. And that was pretty cool. There's probably about 20 people in there working the 2 bottling lines. And they must have been used to having tourists walk through on a regular basis and stuff. But it's really my first serious exposure to bourbon. Found out I liked it, which is really cool. Oh, that's so good. It's nice and smooth. There's like almost like a coconut and vanilla flavor. And all of the flavor development in bourbon, very little of it actually comes from the mash bill. Most of it actually comes from the aging process in the barrels or the casks, or they're 53 gallon of 53 American gallon first use oak barrels, and in order for it to be bourbon, that's what it's got to be aged in. The Buffalo Trace is a blend of usually 5 to 7 year old bourbons. The Eagle Rare is a 10-year, and the Eagle Rare was probably my favorite of the the samples we got after the tour. This was a close second, but for the price difference, I got a really cool glass. So I'm just happy I haven't started coughing on camera from taking too big a drink or something. But the tour was really cool. The place where they usually show the video was already locked up by the time we got there because there wasn't supposed to be a tour at 4 o'clock. But so all of the information that was given in the video, our tour guide gave us while we were in the rick house with all the barrels, and it was really interesting actually being in there and smelling the Angel's Share while he was talking about the history of the distillery, and it was really cool. And it had been raining for like the previous 3 days, and it was just a nice comforting aroma. I don't know if any of you enjoy bourbon. This is a new treat for me, so I really like it. Figured it was worth checking out, mostly because the beginning part of making bourbon is like making beer, because you have to mash to get your starch conversion. In order for it to be bourbon, it's 51% corn, 49% other grains, mostly barley. There's a little bit of rye in this, I believe. Some bourbons have a little bit of wheat. Some have a lot, or have a higher percentage of rye, which I haven't tried any of those yet. But so the mashing process is the same. They ferment with similar yeasts, and then they distill the alcohol out and then age it in the barrels. But it was really, really fun hearing about that process while standing in one of the aging warehouses and stuff. So if you're ever in Frankfurt, Buffalo Trace is right outside of town. I highly recommend the tour. And then at the end of the tour, you get samples, and each person can have 2 samples. They had vodka, the Buffalo Trace, the Eagle Rare, and the White Dog, which is the distilled spirit that goes into the barrels. And that was, I don't see how people drink that. That was actually pretty revolting. But that's me. Other people like it, to each their own. But then one of the cool things was, after we got to taste our samples, the tour guide said, is there anybody here that likes Baileys? And several people raised their hand, and then he held up a bottle and said, not anymore. And he had Buffalo Trace's Bourbon Cream, which is similar to Irish cream, but they make it with some of their bourbon there, and my wife really liked it, so we got a bottle of that as well, and it's all gone. So looked around, I found a couple of recipes on the internet, and I tried to mix them together to come up with something that I'm gonna try making here for the first time. But we'll get this started. Cheers. I'll set that over there. So Bourbon Cream, the stuff that Buffalo Trace makes has real dairy product in it, so once you open it, it's got to be refrigerated. So I used that as kind of a guidance for the recipes that I wanted to use, to try to replicate it here. So what I've done is I started a base, which I shook up in this jar, but what I did is I combined a 14-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk, 3/4 a cup of heavy cream, and half a cup of half and half in one of these, which when you add it all together, 3 cups. I split it between 2 jars, so there's a cup and a half of liquid in each of these. And then the reason I did that is I wanted to try one where the only thing added is bourbon, and then the other one I will add some other ingredients. So to each of these I am going to add 3/4 of a cup of inexpensive bourbon. And even though this was inexpensive, I did some research and found one that showed up on several best of budget bourbon lists. And so I am going to add 3/4 of a cup of bourbon to this one. And shake that up. So this one is just the dairy products and the bourbon. And then since these haven't or won't be homogenized at all, every time you go to serve it, if you do this, you'll want to make sure you shake up the bottle. There we go. So this one, we're going to be adding some other stuff to. So that's got the same base as the other. But to that, in here I have a half a teaspoon of almond extract and a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then the other ingredient is 2 tablespoons of chocolate syrup. Since I'm making this primarily for my wife, the recipes I found actually called for instant coffee as well. She's not a coffee fan. She doesn't mind it in things, but she prefers chocolate. So I figured I would just kind of up the amount of chocolate added and hope for the best. So you can see it really changes the color. And shake until there's nothing left on the bottom. This might be a little more chocolate than is necessary. Looks like chocolate milk, but let's see how it smells. Yeah, those extracts are really strong. So, but we're gonna give that a shot, and I'll let my wife try them and let you know which ones we preferred, or might end up dumping them both back together. But hope you don't mind. It's not about beer, but I figure it's related, and it's a nice treat once in a while. So, coming up, I am gonna have a bunch more news on other stuff, and I look forward to sharing it with you. I got a bunch of ideas and can't wait. Cheers. All right, so now we're gonna taste these. It's been a couple days since I made the recipe. Honestly, the night that I assembled the bourbon creams in the video, neither one of them was very good. They were both pretty terrible, but in the recipes it said, you know, mix the ingredients, let it rest for at least 24 hours in the fridge to chill, shake well, and then serve. So I had no problems leaving it sit, to be honest. Both of them were not very pleasant, and I was very worried about it. I have sampled the plain bourbon cream, and it's pretty good, but we'll get to that. This is the sample, or the recipe, that has almond extract, vanilla extract, chocolate syrup, bourbon, sweetened condensed milk, and light cream in it. In the nose, all I'm getting is almond. Wow, that's off-putting. Yeah, this one has not improved. That's actually pretty terrible. I would not recommend this recipe. It reminds me of cough syrup. It reminds me of a really poor example of like Irish cream, because it just tastes like fake almond flavor and burning, which is I think why it reminds me of cough syrup, because it's just one note. I'm not even getting any of the chocolate flavor. Vanilla is more of that's actually a flavor component in bourbon, but I'm not even tasting anything that reminds me of bourbon. It just tastes like almond extract and burning. So we'll forget that. This example is just light cream, sweetened condensed milk, and bourbon. And in the aroma on this, I'm getting more of a bourbon aroma, which is really pleasant. There's hints of coconut, like nice golden brown toasted coconut, and smells like bourbon. That's really nice. This, it doesn't taste like the Buffalo Trace Bourbon Cream, but it's not bad. I would not add anything else to it. I would play around a little bit, maybe with the type of bourbon or how much. My wife sampled some of this after it sat for a day, and she said the bourbon flavor is still a little too strong for her taste. I like it, but I like bourbon neat and on ice. So what is too much bourbon flavor? I'm not really sure, but since this was intended for my wife, I am gonna need to try some different bourbons. The other thing is this might be slightly over 15%, which is what the Buffalo Trace Bourbon Cream is. So maybe toning it down to that concentration would help. But man, I will post what I did for this part of it below, and it's not bad. I mean, if you really like bourbon, maybe do a full cup of bourbon instead of 3/4 of a cup. If you want a more subtle bourbon note, maybe dial it back to half a cup. The stuff that I used was but yeah, this is actually pretty pleasant. So here's to learning, experimenting, getting stuff wrong, and then being rewarded for sticking it out. Grew up an adventure.